as we continue our sermon series on 1 Corinthians 13 and love. We will first turn to verse 4, which is our focus for today. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant. And then in Romans chapter 8, verses 24 and 25. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So did you hear about this Amazon Prime Now feature? You can order something, and it will be at your door in 1 to 2 hours. You don't need to wait 1 to 2 days anymore. Or Harris Teeter, you can go online and order your groceries, pay for them. They will collect them, bag them, and leave them for you to pick up, or in some places they actually deliver them to your door. You don't need to look up times, go to the movie theater anymore. You just look it up on Netflix and you live stream it or download it. Remember the time that you used to wait week to week for your favorite episode of a television show? Yeah, well now you just binge and go on Netflix and watch the whole season in one day. You don't call anyone, you text them. It's a whole lot faster. And then, of course, in Facebook, we have 24/7 access to 300 of your closest friends, knowing what they ate, what their political views are, what they think is funny and cute in their last vacation pictures, whether you wanted to know all those things or not. I mean, it is amazing what these little devices can do. All the world's knowledge, basically, instantly, at your fingertips. We've done everything possible to eliminate the need to wait, and therefore the need for patience. You see, these electronic devices, they numb us to boredom and waiting because now we can multitask. We can stop at a red light and send a quick text to someone. We can stand in the grocery store and update our Facebook status. We can wait for a meeting and check our email. We can be productive, so there's no need to be bored. There's no need to wait because we can leave the waiting world and enter into a virtual world of quote-unquote productivity. Unfortunately, many psychologists and speakers are trying to get the message out that in this need to eliminate the need to wait, we are raising a whole generation of young people who haven't been able to build some of the necessary social skills they need. Eye contact and having a difficult conversation with someone. Instead, they just text. Or the ability to develop patience because they live in such an instantaneous gratification world. There's no app for building relationships. There's no app for patience. And so unfortunately, the statistics are there to support these claims that especially in the millennial generation that suicide rates and drug overdoses and even kids dropping out of high school and college or their first entry-level positions, not because they're not making the grades, but because they're clinically depressed. How many of you 50 or over knew any of your classmates in high school that dropped out because of depression? It was almost unheard of. But we have a generation now who are depressed. Why? Because because they know that life requires certain skills, but they're not learning them as they grow up. Life requires patience. People require patience. Marriages require patience. Raising children requires patience. And yet, a whole generation is at a loss for some of these basic social skills. But let's face it and be honest. How many times can you think of situations where you have run out of patience? Where your patience has worn thin or run low? So here we are, we get to our love series, to 1 Corinthians 13:4, that says, love is patient and love is kind. So we start with patience. And actually, there wasn't really a Greek word for patience. If you want to translate it literally, it means long-suffering. So when we say we're a church sent out to love, if love is patience, and biblical word for patience is long-suffering, we are sent out for long-suffering. God is patient. If you look at Scripture, and especially in the Exodus passages, we see how patient God is. God has worked miracles to get a whole race of people freed from the degradation of slavery, brought them out, headed toward a promised land, was with them through fire and through a cloud, provided for them. Water came out of rocks, and manna and quail came every single day. And when the moment the leader goes up to get further instructions from God, here they are building a golden calf, worshiping something else. Time after time, they turned their backs on God. They complained. They didn't have that faith. They didn't trust. They didn't depend on God over and over again. But God is patient. God is long-suffering. God never gave up on those people. And God sent Jesus. And how patient was Jesus? Can you imagine hundreds and hundreds of people every day gathering around you, wanting a piece of you, wanting a touch, wanting a word? People who are in need, and yet over time and time again, he sat, he listened, he healed, he taught. He had time for the children in his busy schedule. And how patient was he with the disciples? Come on, over and over and over again, teaching the same lessons. And they still don't get it. And they still argue and bicker over who's going to be the greatest of all. And they still betrayed him in the end, in the final days. But Jesus never gave up on them. God shows up. Scripture testifies to the fact that God is patient, that Jesus is patient, and that we too are sent out into the world to show that patience with others. I prayed for patience once. It looked something like this. God, grant me patience. Hurry up! And God was merciful and kind and answered my prayer and gave me a husband and 2 energetic young boys. And I have so many opportunities to practice patience. Amen. But that's the thing. That's the only way to develop patience, is by being put in situations, by being in relationships where you're going to need it, where you're going to use it. And I have to look back and say, God, You gave me patience. I have a whole lot more patience than I did before I was married. And I know I got a long way to go. And by the way, they're not leaving in protest. They're leaving because Christian has a basketball game. But Melio will admit, I've got a long way to go when it comes to learning patience, but I'm not going to pray for it again. I've learned my lesson. But that's the thing. We only develop patience in the midst of trying and difficult times. And so Romans 5 tells us that in Scripture. Romans 5 says, we can rejoice. We can rejoice, too, when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they're good for us because they help us learn to be patient. And patience develops strength of character in us and helps us to trust God more each time we use it until finally our hope and faith are strong and steady. The only way to develop and learn patience is to be in trying and problematic times. It's those times when we don't get our way, we have an opportunity to learn patience. It's the time when we get interrupted or we get thrown for a loop or something happens that was unexpected that we have an opportunity to learn patience. It's only when we find ourselves in trying times that we can rejoice, because patience develops character. So we develop patience in marriages. We develop patience when we raise children. We develop patience in friendships. And probably the hardest time we have to develop patience is when we get older and we can't do what we used to be able to do. And we have more physical limitations on our lives, and then we have an opportunity to develop patience with ourselves. But ultimately, patience helps us trust God more each time, says Romans 5. And when we trust God more each time, we depend on God to provide for what we need. Because it means we're trusting in what we cannot see. And that's where our Romans passage this morning comes from, in Romans 8, verse 25. It says, if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. But you have to hope for what you do not see. So let me give you an example. I have a hope that one day my children will be able to tie their shoes. I have hope that one day they'll be able to solve difficult challenges in their lives. And as long as I'm focused on that hope, I can wait with patience as they develop those skills, as they practice and learn. But if I'm focused on getting out the door as quickly as possible, I'm going to tie their shoes for them. And if I'm focused on making sure my kids are never sad and never fail and don't get frustrated, then I'm going to solve their problems for them. But as long as I'm focused on the hope that I don't see yet, the hope that they're going to develop some of these skills, I can wait with patience as it takes them 5 minutes to tie their shoes. As they fail to solve their problems, but they learn and they grow through it. And then I can celebrate with them in their accomplishment when they succeed for themselves. I can wait with patience because I'm hoping for something that cannot be seen. So Rick Warren, in his 40 Days of Love study, offers 3 ways in which we can maybe more intentionally develop patience in our lives. And I don't know about you, but I'll take all the hints and tips I can get, because patience is hard. And first thing he says is to develop a bigger perspective. Kind of like hoping for what we don't see. If I get caught up in what's going on at the moment, and the frustration, and the fact I'm not getting my way, or we're a few minutes late, or whatever the case may be, I'm going to get impatient. But if I'm looking at the big picture, if I'm hoping for what I cannot see, if I'm looking at what's really important, I can have more patience in life. So for example, when I am stuck in traffic on 264 trying to get Alex to school on time, but there's an accident and we are literally not moving, I can either get impatient because I'm focused on my tiny situation in the time and the fact that Alex is going to be late for school, or I can have that bigger perspective and thank God I'm stuck in traffic because it means I'm not the one in the accident. When we look at a bigger perspective, we can do that because of wisdom. So Proverbs gives us a passage on wisdom that says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Wisdom gives us that bigger perspective. It's kind of like I shared with the kids. With wisdom and that bigger perspective, we can realize and tell ourselves with that little magnet to be patient. Because God's not finished with us yet. None of us. Be patient with yourself. Because God is not finished with you yet. So the first thing Rick Warren says is to have a bigger perspective, to remind yourself God's not finished with you or with anyone else yet. The second thing he says is that we can deepen our love. Have you ever noticed when you're in a good mood, when you're in a loving mood, when things are going well, it's a little harder to get irritated or upset or impatient? Or maybe on the reverse side, have you ever noticed if you have a bad day at work, you're more likely to come home and yell at your kids and have a fight with your spouse? Because when we're filled with love, when we're focusing on what is good and positive and the blessings in our lives, it's a lot easier to have patience. And when we're filled with frustration and anger, then whoever we meet, in whatever situation, we're likely to get irritated more quickly. So the second thing Rick Warren says is try to deepen your love. Try to remember the positive and the blessings and the good things that are in your life. That'll help you be patient with others. And finally, the third thing he says, depend on Jesus. When you find yourself in a difficult, a trying, an irritating, a frustrating situation that you need patience in, turn your eyes toward Jesus. Colossians 1:11 says, may you be made strong with all the strength that comes from his glorious power, and may you be prepared to endure everything with patience, while joyfully. The point is, endure everything with patience, right? Because only Jesus can give us the strength and the power to be patient when you're enduring those trials of life. So ask Jesus, turn to Jesus. When you feel your blood boiling, when you feel that impatience starting, ask Jesus, give me the strength and the power, Lord, to be patient in this situation. And so, what we find is that in order to get more patience in our lives, we have to look at a bigger perspective. We have to deepen our love for ourselves, for God, and for each other. And finally, we have to depend on Jesus. Turn to him in those trying times. So patience is a loving attitude toward others. But moving to kindness, kindness is loving action toward others. So the two are connected. Love is patient and reveals itself in acts of kindness. So kindness is meeting someone else's need. Kindness is looking to the needs of others. Kindness is love in action. And maybe William Wordsworth said it best, that the best portion of a good man's life is his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. That's what life is all about. That's the best part of life, those little acts of kindness that we do. And I know no one who was kinder than a woman by the name of Mother Teresa. She talked about kindness all of the time. My favorite quotes. She said, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third thing is to be kind. And she said regarding her faith and kindness, that let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile. Don't you love that? Be the living expression of God's kindness in this world. So how do you live with more kindness? Well, it starts with your eyes. First, you have to have people eyes. You have to notice other people. I once read that hurry is the death of kindness. Think about that. Being in a hurry. You can't be kind if you're in a hurry. In order to be kind, you've got to slow down. Because if I'm in a hurry, I've got tunnel vision. I've got a purpose, I got my list of things to do, I don't have enough time, and so this is what I have to do, and I have my blinders on to all the people in my peripheral vision that could use an act of kindness. So it begins with our eyes and slowing down, having people eyes and noticing others, and then it moves to our ears. We've got to listen. Listen to other people and their needs, their fears, their struggles. We have to listen and get to know who people are, and maybe even as they suggest ways that they could really use a helping hand. So we listen, but then it moves to our hands. We've got to seize the moment. We have to do what we can, when we can, with whatever we have at the time. Don't wait. Do that act of kindness now. It was about 3 years ago when I got a phone call from someone I hadn't talked to in, 20 years. She left a message on my voicemail. She was the cafeteria worker in my middle school. And she and I had kept up and exchanged Christmas cards. She was also friends with my mom. And she left me a voicemail and said, "Hello, Christina. I haven't talked to you in a while. I would love to catch up. Here's my phone number. Give me a call." Totally out of the blue. And I had gotten letters from her at Christmas time. And so she had my phone number, and I couldn't call her back at that moment. So I left the voicemail, on my phone. And life just got busy. And I couldn't call back yet. And, I always had an excuse and a reason not to call back. That voicemail was on my phone for a year. I wouldn't delete it because I always had the intention I would call her back. But then I moved here, and all my voicemail got erased, and I didn't have her phone number, but I knew my mom had her phone number. So I meant to ask my mom, what's her phone number? I need to give her a call. But I was moving and I was unpacking, and, everything was going on, and so I've recently learned that she passed away last year. I missed an opportunity. I couldn't slow down enough to put my agenda aside for an act of kindness that would have taken 10 or 15 minutes of my time. Seize the day. Do what you can, when you can, with what you can at that moment. And kindness can be free. It can be a smile. It can be a card. It could be a hug. It could be a word of encouragement. Or it might just be something costly that takes more of you and from you. But do that as you see people, as you listen to their needs, and as you act and seize the moment. I want to leave you with two amazing examples of kindness, of people who slowed down enough to reach out. This is a picture of Jacqueline Kiplimo. She is an elite marathon runner from Kenya. She's won more medals and accomplishments than most people can ever imagine. So here she is in 2010, running a marathon in China. Now, a marathon is 42 kilometers. And at kilometer number 10, she notices a fellow runner who is unable to get any drinks at the drink stops because of his arms. And so she's concerned that he's going to get dehydrated if he's going to run 42 kilometers with no water. So she slows down to run his pace, and she helps him get a drink of water. But that's not the end of the story, because she realizes that at the next drink stop, he also won't be able to have water. So she runs with him from kilometer 10 all the way until 38. And at kilometer 38, she realizes he'll be okay. He can make it for the last 4 kilometers. So then she takes off and kind of continues the marathon race. She came in second. Now, I don't know who came in first, but I know who came in second. And I see this picture, and I remember the story of someone who literally slowed down in the midst of her list of things to do, which was to win the race, to show an act of kindness to a perfect stranger. The other example I want to tell you about is kindness in 2 women, Marjorie Holtman and Liz Wallace. You see, they're in their senior year of college, playing in their last home game of their softball season. They play for Central Washington University, and they're playing against Western Oregon. And so the gal from Western Oregon comes up to bat, Sarah Tukolsky. Now, this young lady has had 3 hits in the last 34 plus at-bats the whole season. She's a senior also, and it's her final game of the season. And it was 0-0. And she hits a 3-run home run. And everyone goes wild. And the 2 women on base, they round and go to home plate. And as Sarah is running to first base, she suddenly collapses. She has a torn ACL. But the rules of the game say that none of her teammates or coaches can touch her. As soon as they touch her, she's considered out. And she loses her home run. If she's able to crawl back to first base, she can get a pinch runner, but again, the runner has to stay on first, so she loses her home run. So it becomes a 2-run single instead of 3-run home run. So the pitcher and the shortstop of Central Washington, the pitcher who had just had a home run hit off of her, go to the umpire and say, "What if we carried her all around the bases and allowed her to touch her foot on second and third and home? Is that against the rules?" And the umpire said no. And that's exactly the picture you see here. The pitcher and shortstop carried their opponent around the bases so she could complete her home run. And because of that, Central Washington loses 4-2. But the act of kindness is remembered. I think patience and kindness are needed more today than at any other time. Patience is a loving attitude toward others. Kindness is loving action toward others. And agape love is both. God has shown us what it means through Jesus Christ, what patience and kindness is. And with God's help, we are called to go out and show that kind of patience and kindness to others.